Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very first edition of Freethinker Fridays. We are delighted that you're here and really excited just to have a casual conversation about middle school. What does middle school look like today? What did it look like in our time? What does it look like at MPA? So I want to start with some introductions, and I'll go first. Natalie Waters-Seema, Director of Admission and Communication at MPA. I am also a parent of a rising 10th grader. Henry has been at MPA since kindergarten. So Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Jenn Milam, and I am lucky enough to be the middle school director at Mounds Park Academy. I am also super fortunate to be the mom of now one middle schooler, a rising 7th grader named Keith, and a freshly launched upper schooler who just finished 8th grade, Alex. It's lovely to see everybody.
Seema and Zoya?
Yeah, I'm Seema Anwar. I am Zoya's mom, and then I also have a rising 10th grader. And we've been at MPA 5 years. Is that right? Our 5th year.
Wow, it's been that long. It seems like.
I know. Yeah.
Wow.
This fall will be the 5th year. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Zoya, and this fall I'll be in 8th grade.
Love it. Thank you all for being here. I couldn't imagine 3 better people to kick off Freethinker Fridays with, and we're just really delighted that you agreed to join me here. So thank you. We called this episode Middle School Stuff, and that is not a term necessarily that we use at MPA or anything that any of us coined. It actually came from a video that we produced with another MPA parent named Evie Zaroon. So I just wanted to start this episode with 30 seconds of Evie Zaroon talking about middle school stuff. I think it will help frame our conversation today and how we're going to approach this. So here is Evie.
I've really noticed talking to the parents of middle schoolers who have stayed in the public schools. The moms will roll their eyes. It's like, oh, middle school is hard. This is hard. And we all remember that. I'm not seeing that. I have 2 middle schoolers now, and they don't even know what I'm talking about. Oh, how was the day? Is everybody being nice to each other? Is there anything I should know? They have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm not seeing the middle school stuff that we're all still wounded from, right? And that I think our sons' peers are seeing in other schools right now.
So that is where middle school stuff came from. And I know that my own middle school experience was not ideal. I went to one of the top public school districts in the Twin Cities area. And I would say that my middle school experience was pretty awful. I ended up leaving midway through my 7th grade year looking for someplace that would be kinder and more inclusive of all people. So just maybe we could start off, Jen. Tell us about your middle school experience. What was it like?
I had a pretty interesting middle school experience, actually, because I started in one place and finished a separate place, kind of like you, Natalie, but in 2 different cities. And as a young middle schooler, I really didn't know who I was and found myself sort of swayed by what was popular or what was sort of taking the loudest approach or the loudest, getting the most attention. And then my family uprooted me in the middle of that, and we moved across the big state of Texas. And I ended up in a new place. Challenges were similar, though. I found myself searching for my own spot, finding it difficult to fit in, and always sort of reaching and not able to really feel wholly myself. So it was pretty rough. It had some high points, but it was tough.
Seema, maybe share a little bit about your middle school experience, where it was and what you...
So my middle school experience is unique in that I didn't go to middle school here in the States. I went to a British school for an expat community, and I was just a handful of Asian kids in this very British school, and I had a tough time fitting in. I struggled a lot. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was very shy and quiet, which also didn't help things. And really have some horrible memories from that time. But I think that's all part of learning, who we are and how to deal with that. So, but I definitely didn't want to repeat that kind of an experience for my kids.
Yeah, that kind of leads us into our next question, Seema. What were you looking for your kids when you looked for a new school, right in these middle school years too?
Well, let's see. Zoya came here in lower school. What I was looking for is some diversity, so that they didn't feel like they were the odd ones out. And we definitely found that at MP. In fact, one of the things that first thing I look up on Niche, out of all the schools that were convenient to us, it had the highest percentage. And then once we got there, I realized it's not just about racial diversity. There's culture and religious, gender and social sexual orientation, neurodiversity, all different kinds, socioeconomic diversity. So that came later. That's not something we were necessarily seeking. But once we got there, we're like, this is a really great experience for the kids. It's not just this homogenous group of people that they're exposed to.
Yeah, that is so true. And absolutely the fabric of who MPA is. About 42% of our students self-identify as students of color, which is wonderful, probably more diverse than any suburban public school in the Twin Cities area. And you're right, Seema, we talk about diversity in a lot of different ways. So I'm happy that you found that and appreciate that. Right. Jenn, maybe share what you were looking for in a middle school for your kiddos. You had 2 come in.
I did have 2 come in, and I think I can talk about it from what I wanted for my own kids and the kind of middle school that I wanted to lead. When I found MPA through our recruiter, one of the very first things that they did share was the commitment to joy, and a deep and really enduring commitment to allowing children to be who they want to be, not who the adults in their life necessarily imagined them to be one day. And that's what I wanted for my kids. And that's the leader that I wanted to be for young people. I actually remember Zoya was in my interview process a couple years ago and shared that, kids at MPA could be who they wanted to be, could envision themselves from day to day, week to week, year to year as whoever it was that they wanted to become, and follow the passions that emerged and then let those go as they grow up to try something new. For my kids, I have 2 very different kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, 1 math talented, 1 super athletic, 1 right at grade level, but a hard worker, 1 more shy, 1 more outgoing. And from day to day, month to month, they get to be who they are. And they've taught me to parent the kid that I have, not the kid that I thought I would have. And I tried to take that into my leadership at MPA too.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenn. Zoya, is this basically what you're experiencing at MPA? How is it the same or different? What have you found here? And what really has made your middle school experience special and unique?
So when I came to MPA, I was afraid that I wouldn't make any friends, but I got a great buddy, and now I have an amazing group of friends. I like that we can try many different things at MPA without having to be the best at them. For example, I had never played basketball until last year, but I had fun even though we didn't win most of our games. And I'm a pretty quiet kid, so I never thought I would have seen myself getting a lead role in the middle school play. But this past year I did, and I feel like it's okay to try these new things even if you're not great at them, which is what MPA has taught me. And it's nice because the community is so supportive.
Love it. Oh my gosh, I wish I would have had that kind of experience. I hear some shy themes running through this conversation. I was super shy too, which is funny that we're all going live on Facebook in this way, right?
Right.
Pushing ourselves outside of our boundaries and our limitations. So that's good. Evie lumps together all of these random challenges that come from the middle school years, and she calls them middle school stuff. Jen, help us understand middle school, the middle school brain, what's going on in these years that makes it so ripe with challenges and stuff.
Well, what I tell kids and I tell their parents is to hang on for the wild ride that is adolescence as they emerge into young, more independent people. But what's happening in the middle school brain is that it's actually on fire. And during the time that your young person goes from an older child, if you will, to a middle schooler or a pre-adolescent, their brain is actually changing as much or more as it did from their birth to the first year. And you can remember back to when your kids were tiny, from when they went to being tiny babies to learning to walk and speak and think and be a little bit independent and use the word no pretty forcefully. Those same kinds of connections and growth in the brain biologically are happening. And then you throw in a really good dose of hormones and you get what I call the brain on fire. And so a lot of times your young kid who's becoming a middle schooler is more forgetful, perhaps is more stubborn, perhaps has stronger opinions, stronger emotions. The highs are high, the lows are low. And probably the single most important thing that happens in middle school that leads to the stuff that we're talking about is that young people are breaking away from their parents, as their parents are the people who were the primary navigators of all social relationship and connection until about 10 or 11 years old, which is when middle school starts for us in 5th grade. And so children start to make choices about what's important to them and about the kind of friend that they want to be. And they learn how to draw boundaries. Sometimes they do it more kindly than others, but still they're setting their own boundaries and finding their own way. The relationships from their childhood sometimes fade as their passions and interests grow, as they assume their own new ideas about the world around them. And so a lot of times the stuff that we talk about in middle school that can kind of crop up, the competition, sort of the unkindness, the clickiness, a lot of that is a result of kids trying to find their way and often not knowing how to do that. And just like we taught our 2- and 3-year-old that they couldn't throw themselves down on the grocery store ground because they didn't get what they wanted, we too have to help shepherd young people through this time and learn to deal with their relationships kindly in a little bit more mature way, and to set boundaries and be healthy in ways that are new to them.
Zoya, does that match kind of what's going through your brain and your peers' brain? Tell us a little more about how that.
I agree. I think in middle school, like, we're getting more responsibility. So what Miss Milam was talking about, that's what happens. And I think in middle school is kind of like when we find who we are, which is probably why all of those things happen with more responsibility.
Yeah. So I want to show you a comment that came in on our Facebook page. A little kudos to you. And I just want to encourage our friends that are watching to please comment and ask us questions and pop in with your thoughts too. That's a really important part of this kind of event, and we'd love to hear from everyone who's watching on Facebook.
You know, Nat, if I can jump in real quick, I think one of the things that, and Zoya put it really beautifully, is we're becoming, ourselves. We're trying to find our way. And, when young people encounter difficulties or they're trying to become who they want to be, often they bump up against preconceived notions about who they should be. And so much of the conversations that I have with young people navigating relationships and even navigating their own internal dialogue with themselves is to be kind to themselves, but also think about how who you are makes a difference and impacts other people. So having young people use their imagination in some ways to envision how the other person feels in that moment is an interesting juxtaposition that young children are not necessarily all that capable of, but the brain, as it expands, can better interpret how their actions impact the world around them. And that's just a part of growing and learning to be a part of the world.
Jen, I couldn't agree more. And I found that when Henry was going through, I wanted to make sure that societal expectations or my expectations for him weren't what he was feeling pressured by. I want him to feel pressured by his own internal motivation and not external forces, and to figure out who he truly wanted to be. So I couldn't agree more. Jen, can you talk a little bit about some of the things MPA does to help kiddos navigate this time, and parents too?
I'll start with the parent side, and Seema can jump in here too. But one of the things I say often to parents is to build your tribe. So when middle school parents join us in the division, I make a lot of effort, and the Parents Association, which Seema's into, provides a lot of opportunities for parents to be in relation to one another. And I often say that we have to remind each other that we are good people, that we're great, and that we're doing a good job, because sometimes our stubborn and sassy and prickly middle schooler is not necessarily overjoyed with compliments for us as parents in this moment, as they try to break away and find their independence. So what I say to parents is be patient with yourself, but more be patient with them. Try to remember that when you were this age, what was most important to you were your friends. It was developing your own ideas. And so when you give a piece of advice and it's not accepted, but the best friend gives the exact same piece of advice and somehow it's the sagest thing they've ever heard, compliment that, stick with that, find that as a win, as opposed to engaging in the constant power struggle. I think our young people are remarkable right now, actually. I'm wholeheartedly happy about the future of our world based on the young people that I work with. And I encourage parents to trust their young people, because in some ways they are growing up in a much more agile and open world than we are, and they know what they need. And they're becoming better at asking for it, which I really love too. For young people in particular, I say the same thing. Find your people. Find your tribe, find the people who make you feel good, and then be one of those people to somebody else. Zoya actually is a remarkable example of this. She wouldn't admit it because she's very humble and shy too, but she takes leadership roles, quiet ones sometimes, but she often steps up to do the right thing, to be a good friend, to seek somebody out who might be feeling a little distant that day. But most of the work that I do with kids, as I shared, is about managing their relationships. So much of this time of a child's life is a gift. And if you can be a trusted adult without judgment to a young person, that's the best gift you can give them, because they just need you to listen sometimes and not solve. So I hope that answers your question. I kind of went on a roundabout way.
Yeah, no, it's good. Thanks, Jen. Seema, maybe you could just talk about what it's like being the parent of a middle schooler, and what are some of what is some of the stuff that you see or don't see? What has your experience been like as a middle school parent?
So I was concerned when we first got here too, because I'm shy, my kids are shy, that shy thing that keeps coming up. I've been so pleasantly surprised how my kids have been able to fit in and find their tribe, as you're saying, Jen, and but even go beyond that, just not friendships, but who they're becoming. And I think a big part of it is how supported they are. Mm-hmm. In being able to try new things and knowing beforehand, like Zoya said, knowing I'm not good at this, I'm still going to do it. And taking risks, like she said, mentioned about the play, and so as a parent, I'm so happy to see that. And another thing is when we were talking about who they are and who they are really, as opposed to like the societal expectation of who they should be. One thing that I struggle with is who I want them to be. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, MPA teachers and Jen, they do such a good job of supporting them that these kids are able to say to me, Mom, I think this is not me. They'll push up against me and say, no, I don't think this is me. I don't think I want to do this. I don't want to try that. I do want to try this. And so you know, I really have enjoyed seeing, you know, how they've taken control of this journey. So both my kids are very different, but they've just gone on different, you know, different paths in different ways. So
that is an excellent lead in to one of the questions we just got in from Aaron Roseth. He actually has 3 children joining us this fall at MPA. And he's got a question for you, Zoya. What advice would you give to a parent who would like their children to participate in more school activities? And I think by activities, he's probably meaning clubs and organizations, because I know his kiddos already participate in athletics too. So what are some of your thoughts on that? What advice would you give to a parent? How can they encourage that without being overbearing, right?
I would say, like, let the child decide what they want to do, because if they're interested in doing it, then it's more likely they're going to enjoy it and they'll want to do it. Instead of, does that answer the question? Instead of forcing them to do an activity that they wouldn't like to?
Yeah. What are some of the activities you've been in at MPA that you found enjoyable?
Well, the Social Change Club and basketball and the play.
The play.
Oh yeah.
So do a lot of kids participate in activities and clubs and things in middle school?
I think there are a handful of middle schoolers that do.
Yeah, just a handful. I think there's probably more than a handful. Does it help when you go to activities and you join things together? Does that help?
And I think that sometimes you get to like spend time with middle schoolers outside of your friend group too, which is nice.
Yeah, that is so true. It's so true.
Aaron, one of the things that happens with kids at MPA a lot of times is they do this bartering system where they'll say, hey, I really want to try out for the play. So if you'll try out for the play with me, I'll try out for baseball with you. And so there's a lot of bartering that goes on. Safety in numbers, certainly for middle school kids, they feel a sense of camaraderie, but a lot of times that really positive, encouraging peer pressure, if you will, which is very different than sort of traditional middle school stuff that many of us experienced, turns out that many kids really find their passion. And then the other thing that happens at middle school at MPA is that we don't have traditional electives like many schools do. We actually want our middle schoolers to experience everything: art, performing arts, instrumental music, general music, so that they don't get to opt out of the things that maybe make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. And when you lean into those things as a young person, you might find things that you love you didn't know you loved, and you might find talents you didn't know you had. And then when you go to upper school, you find yourself on a fine arts path that maybe you started off as an athlete, like my guy, but found a love for the cello that he enjoys. And so it's exciting.
Yeah. Jen, do you have any other advice for middle school parents? And please, everyone who's watching, feel free to chime in with some questions and thoughts too. Any other advice you can think of?
I'll give the advice that I use as a leader the most often, is that we want to keep our kids from hurt. We want to keep them from failure. We want them to feel a lot of success and to feel a lot of self-confidence. And sometimes in doing that, because our intentions are so good, and parents' intentions are always the best. I've never met a parent that said they didn't want the best for their kiddo. But one of the things that we do as parents, and remember, I'm swimming in the same pond with you, is that we want to keep them from the hard stuff. If anything, what COVID has taught us is that we can't keep them from the hard stuff. But it's really to see every moment as a teachable moment. So instead of being angry that they made a really nasty choice, or instead of being frustrated with them when they didn't do their best, instead of overreacting maybe when they bring home a C, but you thought they should have had a B, take those as moments to pause and work through them and to think about, well, why did you make a C in that class? Maybe it's because you had to work really hard in this other class and that was important to you. And so Children are making real-time decisions and negotiating their space just like we are. And when they make a mistake or they choose poorly, not to overreact. See it as a time to say, you know, I see that didn't really turn out for you maybe the way you would have wanted, or maybe you really hurt your friend, but you didn't intend to. But here are the ways we can work through that, and maybe here's how you could have thought about that a little bit differently. Because when we get angry and we react quickly, we shut down the conversation. And middle school is really about opening the conversation and laying the groundwork that they keep talking to us all the way through upper school and college. So my best wisdom is the wisdom I try to tell myself as I live with 2 adolescents is be patient, listen, don't overreact. And when I have a kiddo who's made a mistake at school, I'm not quick to label it or pathologize it or make it something that it's not. Sometimes it's just that moment. And they need help through that tiny moment, much like they did as preschoolers. What's happening right then, and then move on. And then once you've dealt with it, let it go, because the young people let it go much quicker than we do as grown-ups.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks, Jen. Seema, you've been through this. You've got an upper schooler. Any wisdom you have after navigating these middle school years? Any final advice you have for parents? We're almost out of time.
Yeah, well, I would just say that the issues that they experience as 6th graders change when they get to be 7th graders, and then you think, oh, what can I do to help this kid? And then they get to be 8th graders, and it's a whole different set of issues. And there's nothing like what they were struggling with in 6th grade. So it's just constantly changing as they're growing. And then they get to upper school, and the challenges are different. And so at any step, it's not like, oh, how are we going to get through this? Because now I've learned with my older one, they will get through it. Something else will come up, but that's just part of growing up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Any final questions from the audience? I'll just, while you type them in, perhaps I will preview our next Freethinker Friday, next Friday. We're going to wonder about setting the foundation in lower school. So we are going to have 2 of our wonderful lower school teachers with us, and one of our pre-K teachers actually commented that, this is Debbie LaChapelle, she's our pre-K teacher, that MPA lower school sets a foundation for middle school students to get ready for a new chapter in their lives, and we couldn't agree more. And that's actually what we're talking about next week. So I'm excited for that. Doesn't look like we have any other questions, but please make plans to join us next Friday at noon, same time, same place, different people hosting and participating. So I just want to say thank you so much to the 3 of you for joining us today on our very first Freethinker Friday. It's bound to get even different and better all summer long. Maybe I'll take the next one from outside, but it was just really lovely to see you and to connect. Oops, we've got one comment. I'll just show really quick. We'll end with a little thank you. Thank you for the hard work. It is hard work raising kids, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.